This article by the New York Post is titled, "City Dwellers Are Finding Out Camping is Gross." If the headline doesn't make it evident enough, the article discusses the increased interest in camping from city dwellers due to the pandemic, entirely unaware of life outside of their concrete jungle. The lack of bathrooms, bugs, and the logistics of packing have been too much for city folk. Perhaps their impression of camping came from places like this. This is an entirely different experience from actually camping.
I hate camping.
You know, social media has created its own version of reality. We're aware of this notion when it comes to beauty. There's reality, and then there's the filter, body morphing, enhanced version of ourselves we show off online. This has also started applying to job titles. Reality of being an entrepreneur, social media version of being an entrepreneur. There's food, reality of food, social media version of food. One other fascinating reality social media has created is in the domain of mental health. Although the nature of these platforms have done wonders to raise awareness of mental health issues, they've also advanced a false perception that can be harmful. That's why I was surprised that a podcast between Trisha, Paytas, and H3H3 actually showed an honest look at mental health I've never seen before.
Welcome to Psych IRL, my name's Donna. Today's episode will discuss issues of mental health that may cause some of you discomfort. If you think you are one of those individuals, I highly encourage you to skip this video and come back to the next one. Now, Trisha Paytas has gotten into some drama from the past couple weeks, but we're not going to talk about that. This episode will strictly discuss issues of mental health and how it's being redefined through social media, so please keep that in mind. Now, something that really inspired me to make this video is the Frenemies podcast hosted by Ethan Klein and Trisha Paytas. And it wasn't really the podcast itself that inspired me, but the viewer reaction. I also want to make the distinction that although I do have a degree in psychology, I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist. But I do think that this could be a global conversation, whether you're a mental health advocate, someone with a mental illness, someone with a loved one with a mental illness, or if you are a mental health professional, each of those perspectives are important. So this podcast revealed to me a misconception I was totally unaware of. Not just me, but many of you and even mental health advocates.
Before we go any further into what exactly it is about Frenemies that gives us insight into mental health, you're going to need to know a bit of background on Trisha Paytas. Trisha has a history of purposely creating drama for views and capital, from claiming dogs don't have brains all the way to saying being gay is a choice.
Oh, God.
She's trolled her way to the top of YouTube. Although those videos were created years ago and she's recanted those beliefs, this history has damaged her relationship with viewers.
You turned a new leaf. You erased all your problematic videos.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
You erased your personality, what is it called? Borderline or
DID.
Yeah, DID.
Yeah.
You erased your trans video. And you made an apology.
Yeah. I feel like that's a step in the right direction for people
do too.
trying to like see that I'm sincere.
Issues she presents today are repeatedly met with skepticism because of this reputation. Modern tale of the boy who cried wolf. Today, Trisha claims not to do those types of videos anymore, but she does tend to overshare the details of drama going on in her life and get involved in drama she's not involved with. The oversharing has branded her into one word: crazy. What's fascinating is that she's not branded as someone going through mental health struggles. She's branded as the word we're not supposed to use on someone going through mental health struggles. With the rise of campaigns like Mental Health Awareness Month, individuals sharing their stories online, and therapists sharing information one used to only get in a therapy session, the reaction to Trisha Paytas doesn't make any sense.
This isn't a defense of Trisha's past actions. Like I said before, the behavior she's done deserves criticism, but the criticism she's getting isn't that of people who understand mental health issues. Like Trisha herself has said, if she's done this,
today we're going to have a question and answer session with my pet llama.
and this,
I woke up this morning feeling like a chicken nugget.
and the internet has concluded that she's crazy, why isn't her criticism that of understanding and empathy? This doesn't make sense with the rise of campaigns like Mental Health Awareness Month. Perhaps our conception of mental health is misconstrued by social media.
Life imitates art far more than art imitates life. This comes from Oscar Wilde's 1889 essay, The Decay of Lying. In essence, the quote is saying, artists have taught people to see things in life and in nature that aren't really there. The flowers that bloom in the spring were just flowers until poets and painters taught us their beauty. As far-fetched as that sounds, you'll see it perfectly depicted in cinema and TV. This is Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian. Because of the expensive nature of CGI, Baby Yoda was created in two different ways. The scenes of the character walking were done in CG, while shots of him sitting were done with a puppet. What's amusing is that the CG version of the character is animated to mimic that of a puppet rather than mimicking what movement may look in real life. Audiences believe that the puppet-like movement is how Baby Yoda would move in reality.
That's a really common issue you face with visual effects, is very often reality is not what we've been trained to see in movies.
There's reality and then there's Hollywood reality, and everyone thinks that Hollywood reality is what things actually look like. So if you make it look like real, they think it looks fake.
From movies to social media to art, the medium affects how something is depicted. In film, the depiction of mental illness is distorted because of something called the good story problem, explained by Tim Hickson from the YouTube channel Hello Future Me. In essence, the good story problem is the following. In general, movies follow a narrative structure that creates something called a good story. It can be broken down into 3 acts. Act 1 contains the setup and introduction. Act 2 contains the rising action and climax of the movie. And Act 3 contains the falling action and resolution.
Sometimes doing justice to the topic and discussion of mental illness would mean taking a less conventional storytelling route that doesn't maximize tension, setup, and payoff, the 3 things that we've been told make for a good story.
A good story also illustrates the protagonist to be likable and relatable. On the contrary, if the character with a mental illness is the antagonist, they're often painted as unlikable and ultimately evil. Both scenarios make for a good story, but they don't do a good job at representing mental illness accurately. The point of this isn't to say that films should always reproduce something in the most accurate way possible. I mean, come on. Sometimes conversation isn't portrayed realistically. Here is a scene from the Netflix show You, without the protagonist's narration.
I know we're not in the truth yard, but we can still be honest with each other, right?
Strange. The point I'm trying to make is that the medium's framework can have an effect on how a subject is illustrated, despite it being fairly obvious to take movies with a grain of salt. As the VFX artists said in the previous clip, the things you see in a movie become part of your reality without you even noticing it. That can do a lot of damage to understanding mental health.
The best example I can think of is that the climax is the highest point of tension in the story, so we might think to use the worst suicidal episode a character has ever had. But this cannot immediately be followed by a quick release of tension when they overcome it with a permanent recovery. The reality is that the worst suicidal episode someone has is almost definitely in the middle of their mental illness, not near the end.
Social media has its own good story problem. Let's begin by looking at the mechanism of how things on the internet are shared and boosted algorithmically. The fundamentals of how content gets recommended to users are generally the same. The basics of virality are click-through, average view duration, and engagement. Of course, each platform has its variances. Google may prioritize what a collective is searching for, while Facebook may prioritize content that's shareable, but all platforms follow these basics. So when uploading on these platforms, publishers will cater whatever they want to talk about to this framework, so it goes viral. Now, imagine what that does to the topic of mental health. Let's go down the list. Click-through rate is how likely someone will click on a piece of content when they recommend it via the algorithm. This results in sensationalized or simplified headlines. On platforms where content isn't so reliant on headlines, eye-catching visuals are equally as important. Then you have the content itself. A clickbait title isn't enough for a piece of content to go viral. The goal of these platforms is for you to spend as much time on their site as possible. So it's important for the piece of content to keep the reader's attention as long as possible. From this emerges a watered-down version of a complex issue because it's designed to be translatable to laymen. That results in list videos,
Psychology tricks to fuck with people's minds that I may or may not use.
TED Talks, articles announcing a new study, but the scientific paper itself doesn't often go viral. It's hard not to see why. Next, the more the viewer is able to understand the content, the more likely they are going to engage with it and share with their friends. Thus, the authors who publish this content will mold what they want to say about mental health in this social media framework, so it's optimized to be recommended within the algorithm. Tumblr was probably one of the first places that embodied this optimization and contributed to the misconception of mental health issues. The platform in 2007 gave rise to a community designated to discuss matters of self-harm and depression. Due to the general public viewing such issues as taboo, the anonymity allowed for open discussion without repercussion or judgment from those who wouldn't understand. Without anyone in whom they could confide, many found solace on Tumblr from others they could relate to. A number of users described the community as helping them to not feel alone. There was just one problem. The framework of how things are shared on social media encouraged a new subculture that redefined depression. Depression and self-harm turned into an aesthetic on Tumblr I like to call poetic sadness. It's characterized by images and short sayings that kind of beautify mental health issues. Anne Sophie Bine from The Atlantic describes the content on Tumblr to evoke negative emotions through art and call it depression. Black and white photographs of mystical, emaciated women who stare off into the distance put psychological torment and beauty on the same page. And quotes like, "So it's okay for you to hurt me, but I can't hurt myself," and "I want to die a lovely death," try to justify self-harm. All this is at the tip of anyone's fingertips. Anyone can search tags like self-harm, depression, or sadness and find thousands of blogs with a similarly distorted vision of what it means to be depressed. Elizabeth Nolan Brown from Bustle describes how Tumblr has reinvented depression. This distorted vision of depression makes a serious disease seem like a sort of cool personality trait, and its sufferers as ethereal beauties, damaged but poetic and profound. In addition to the romanticism of mental health issues, the engagement users would attain from posting these images seemed to encourage them to post more of this content. Let's actually test something out. One theory I've had is that the framework of social media encourages more sad posts because people are more likely to engage with it. This is why the mental health community of Tumblr looks the way it does. So, how would you, my audience, react if I posted something sad?
Now, I don't want to be too negative and worry you all, but it still has to be in character. Normally, I would do this on Instagram, but I think some of you are getting suspicious, so I'm going to do this on my community post. I decided to post, "Guys, I'm trash." That statement is self-deprecating, but it's also in a joking tone to make you not worry. Let's see what happens. Now that we know that the medium affects how things are portrayed, what happens when viewers come face to face with mental illness not in the framework of social media? Let's go back and look at the Frenemies podcast.
The first upload was on September 15th, 2020. It came as a shock to many as these two are an unlikely pair to start a business. Understandably so, their introduction to each other started off on a hostile note. In a video called Instagram vs. Reality, published over a year ago, Ethan Klein attempted to examine body image on Instagram compared to real life. In addition to comparing the two, Ethan had commentary some found unsavory, but more found it funny. By the looks of the like to dislike ratio and positive comments, the majority of viewers found this video non-offensive and even helpful. There was one person who was featured that found the work rather distasteful, to say the least. Trisha Paytas.
There's this 40-year-old man shaming girls.
This led to a series of Twitter battles back and forth, which eventually ended with Ethan inviting Trisha as a guest on his podcast. The dynamic between the two of them resulted in an entertaining episode that netted over 2 million views. What drew a crowd to this was how the two interacted. When a critic or commentary channel comes face to face with someone they've criticized, they often back down from their original points. I will say Ethan has done this as well. Perhaps it's nervousness or the lawyer standing in the corner that causes the two parties to settle down. Although a calm and polite conversation is always positive, I will say it is less entertaining because there isn't any conflict. Trisha and Ethan's first podcast together had plenty of entertainment value at hand. Both would stand firmly on their original points, generating conflict that captivated viewers and attracted new ones. Trisha would become a repeat guest a few more times until they decided on a new series that capitalized on this dynamic, Frenemies.
Well, my friends, here we are. They said it would never happen. Me and Trisha making a podcast, and frankly, I thought they were right.
This introduces us to a new framework, podcasting. Podcasts as a medium can offer an alternate perspective on subjects because of its unique framework. For the purposes of this video, when I discuss podcasts, I'm going to be limiting it to YouTubers who've started one. Despite also using clickbait titles, viewers understand that the headline doesn't necessarily describe what the whole episode is about. For example, the first 20 minutes can be the host discussing their week, then the guest comes in and introduces themselves for the next 10 minutes, then there's a few minutes of tangents here and there, then the headline gets talked about finally, and then there's the rest of the podcast. Thus, listeners are likely already fans of this YouTuber who want a less edited, conversational style piece of content. Videos, articles, and images often stay on topic, while podcasts can go in different directions. In addition, as opposed to social media content, viewers are often actively engaged in another activity while listening to a podcast. The outcome is less skipping around, which results in listeners hearing nuance they wouldn't otherwise hear in more edited mediums. Many have come around to Logan Paul specifically for this reason. Now, with the rise of free info online and campaigns like Mental Health Awareness Month, you would think people would understand mental health issues when they see it in an unfiltered setting like a podcast. No. There was a moment on the Frenemies podcast that gave us a look into, I'm not sure how to describe it really. The event that triggered this moment was instigated by an overarching joke that's often used on the podcast, calling Trisha crazy. There are times when it feels like she's okay with it, but this didn't seem to be one of those times. They go back and forth until Trisha brings up something Ethan told her in confidence. Then Ethan fires back explaining why Trisha is dangerous.
This is why you are such a dangerous person, especially to be close with. Because you'll take something that I've told you, you'll take something that somebody told you in confidence, and you'll use it, you'll weaponize it against them.
That's not true.
That's what you just did.
No,
and luckily for you, I don't care, and I'm okay with it. But you go, oh, well, I told you an anecdote about how I used to take tramadol back in Israel when I was bored in a dead-end job, and you literally just weaponized that against me.
You called me crazy, knowing my history.
Bro, we always call you crazy. You're upfront crazy.
But if you're gonna call me crazy, then I'm gonna say, hey, why don't you own up to what you've done? That also
doesn't make me crazy.
This episode gets ugly quickly as both parties continue explaining what's wrong with the other. Insults are fired left and right.
Yeah, I can see why your relationships don't work out.
I can see why you've been with the same person for 12 years.
Thank you.
After seeing how far it has gotten, Ethan apologizes, but Trisha is unconsolable and walks off set.
All right, Trisha.
As you can see, the behavior Trisha displayed is far from being okay, but it's also a real glimpse into the dark side of mental health issues not often talked about on social media. This altercation almost mimics real life, with viewers having a front row seat. There is no narrator telling us who's right or who's wrong. We listen to the arguments and come to a judgment ourselves. From the comments, the majority of people took Ethan's side. Now, a couple of episodes later, something unexpected happens. Dr. Drew guest stars on the Frenemies podcasts, and they discuss the behavior that happened a few episodes back when Trisha walked off the set.
So that was harsh on both your sides, right? Mm-hmm. Trisha, here's the thing. It's really hard to be as open as Trish is, okay? And you could argue that you're so open, Trish, that you don't really kind of perceive boundaries.
Just like that, it seemed like the viewers came to an understanding of who Trisha actually is. How did that happen? What idea of mental health has social media created that it takes a therapist to explain to an audience what's going on?
Hurt people, right?
Of course,
when you're hurt, that it's not of course. You can deal with it a little more productively than just lashing out.
I go to DBT classes and stuff, so I know my issue is
okay.
It's like a group therapy for
dialectical. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy, and it helps keep other people in mind when you want to do something.
Because I have a really, I can't control myself. It's almost like I black out, and like, so when I get mad or upset, or I felt in that position, all of a sudden I started feeling like, wow, I'm being like looked at as the villain, like I did something wrong.
Okay, so there's a lot here, right?
Yeah.
And Ethan, she's doing something active about it. She's actually getting treatment.
Yeah, no,
for
that
it.
makes me happy to hear.
Tumblr recognized the subculture it was helping to facilitate and decided to put a stop to it. They limited posts that could be interpreted as romanticizing self-harm and depression and banned a number of blogs. The platform still allowed content regarding these issues as long as it was for educational purposes. Regardless, the community began to dissipate as Tumblr's popularity declined. At that point, Tumblr's impact on mental health was already apparent. It shaped a generation's perception of these issues, who carried with them that onto other platforms. You still see remnants of that today passed around on Instagram, Facebook, and content on TikTok. It still typifies mental illness as a sad, lonely, misunderstood personality. Keep in mind that those images aren't necessarily bad, but it puts one aspect of mental health issues at the forefront while minimizing other behaviors that can actually give you a better understanding of what a particular issue may look like. If you think about it, it's pretty easy to care about someone that's sad, which is what these images often portray, or what we think they're supposed to portray. This image, for instance, indicates that OP tends to push people away. Conceptually, we may think, oh, they're going to retreat and disappear from the friend group out of sadness. What they don't tell you is that sometimes pushing someone away may mean from a place of anger. At times, people will say nasty things even though they don't mean it because it's their unhealthy way of coping. I don't think mainstream viewers realize that. Mental health issues have always been branded as sad person, but also it's a complicated issue to discuss to a viewer who has no idea what a particular illness or disorder may look like. I think it's hard to discuss, say, the angry side of it because experts never want to stigmatize something further. I will say one show that does a good job of portraying mental illness is BoJack Horseman. Although BoJack Horseman is affected by the good story problem as well, I really like how it exhibits a character's unhealthy behavior, but also explains how they develop that behavior in the first place. By doing this, you show the full scope of how terrible an illness can get.
You know, I was beautiful before I got pregnant.
I know.
You ruined me, BoJack.
I know.
You better grow up to be something great, to make up for all the damage you've done.
I will.
Additionally, though, it allows mainstream viewers to empathize by showing the origin of such behavior. This message is successfully implemented and reflected by the community BoJack Horseman has facilitated. Look up any video essay or forum about the show and you'll find fans analyzing the characters' behavior as well as using them to reflect on their own. In this episode, Dr. Drew is able to clarify Trisha's behavior in a way the audience is able to understand. Now, we aren't here to excuse anything, but it's quite clear from the change in attitude that the viewers just experienced that despite the rise in mental health campaigns, people still do not have a clear picture of mental health issues. I think another really interesting question to ask is how do we, as an audience, interact with instances of individuals expressing mental health issues online? Let's take the FouseyTube story, for example.
He sells out the Greek a free show, and he says Drake's going to be there, and obviously Drake never shows up. But basically what ensues is a lot of insanity, a lot of confusion, and a very little crowd. And him stalking Drake, which is probably the most entertaining and concerning thing to come out of this whole thing.
This was recorded for the masses to see, and every single drama channel reported on it. Keemstar even made a documentary about it. On one hand, this was a public spectacle, and posters should expect memes and jokes when they post anything. Like this surely deserves the critiques it gets.
Bella Hadid in my DM.
Yes! No one cares!
4 ghosts on YouTube.
Do you think Bella Hadid sitting at home like, damn, Fuji just shouted me out? No, she's like, that's a yikes from me, boys. That cringe. I'm out.
Bro.
Unsend message on Instagram.
I hope in every single stream for the rest of your life, your audience reminds you how much of a you look like tonight.
I'm sure they will.
On the other hand, this was also a manic episode, so should those critiques have been different?
What went wrong, the first thing that went wrong was that I was in a manic state. I was in a manic state and I was like, my visions were diluted. Like I had delusions of grandeur up the ass. Like I was about to change the world.
Truthfully, I don't know if I have the right answer. We're in such a weird place where people take their issues and exploit them as entertainment.
Yeah, see, I think in a show like this, you kind of have to own it and say you're using it because you need craziness because that's what you're sort of creating here in the studio.
I love it.
A certain amount of craziness.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great when they're in control. There have also been times when it hasn't gone well.
Let's go ahead and take a look at that post I posted. It's been about 3 weeks. And the results are, of all my community posts, it is the second most responsed comment. The first is me asking a question, so I understand if that has the most comments, but this one is just a pure statement. Let's read what some of you guys said.
Some viewers made jokes, which is usually in line with how I expect my viewers to react. Same TBH. Hi Trash, I'm Dad. Just remember it's trash can, not trash can't. Don't let that stop you. You're making it very difficult to unionize the raccoons. Another response was that of skepticism, which is also another trait I find in my viewers. Can't wait to see the upcoming video on the internet's need to reaffirm influencers who make self-deprecating remarks. Y'all, she is obviously doing something for a video. Can't wait for the video on this. You really have to hide the fact that you're making a video better. And a lot of you were way too kind. T, talented. R, radiant. A, artistic. S, smart. H, heartwarming. You're right, you're trash. Don't talk down to yourself. Would you tell me I'm trash and you don't even know me? You can rewire your brain to think positively about yourself. It's called neuroplasticity. Wait, is this a test? LOL Psych IRL, you pulling everyone's leg. Ooh. Is the next video topic going to be sad fishing? No, you're Donna. You, ma'am, are not trash, and your content is quirky, informative, timely, unique, binge-worthy. Just discovered you and your fascinating channel.
Here's my point on what you just said. You said it became more acceptable to talk about your mental health stigma, and people always like when it's Mental Health Awareness Month, everybody's involved and chime in and check in on your friends. Yet when I post about my depression at 30 years old, you still got the people saying you were going through that at 22. What are you talking about? You still going through it at 30? Are you faking it at this point? Are you lying? Are you good? There's still that huge stigma that if you go through depression, one day is gonna be gone.
Movies and social media, to an extent, have taught us resolution is inevitable in the future. If we hold on a little longer, things will get better. From reflecting on our own life, we intuitively know that is not the case. Life is a chaotic roller coaster filled with ups and downs that sometimes never seem to end. It's difficult. Giving someone that courtesy when we've been trained to think happily ever after is right around the corner.
So I want to know if this video changed your perspective on mental health. That's the end of the video. I will see you guys next time. Stay psyched.